Hello everybody. Welcome back. It's been a while and I apologize for that. Um, the episode proceeding after this one is probably the result of the worst recording session I've ever had in my life, and hopefully will be the worst recording session I've ever had in my life, and it has taken me literal months to figure out how to make it watchable. I am not sure I've succeeded yet. Be that as it may, I think that I've taken enough time off after finishing the blind run to sort of take stock of things to start up again. With that little state of affairs announcement out of the way, let's continue on. Last time, I believe that we were exploring below the catacombs, and then we got destroyed by spurious wall physics. It pays to be safe with the bone balls. They hurt quite a bit, and they're deceptively difficult to outrun, so it's better to just wait. Getting that maximum ember value, restoring a little bit of health because I'm really good at video games. Interesting to note that since I had that enchanted, even though I don't have the stats to wield it one-handed, it still did a fairly appreciable amount of damage, even though I was doing it while the X was appearing on my little weapon icon. The rogues with the sickles are probably the most dangerous because they like to hop around. The rest of them you can kind of just stun lock if you're using a heavy weapon. Not necessary to do that, but after all the times we've had to deal with patches in this series, it's a little cathartic. There's no need to speak to Henri again. Another reason that I sort of put this off was that this recorded so poorly there's native audio desync that I cannot fix. Like, it's inbuilt into the recording, it's not a commentary issue. Basically, this entire, portion of the game is a huge shit show. Hopefully I can minimize it a little bit in post. I'm not sure how well it's going to go, given that it's so ingrained into the audio, but who knows. It seems to be somewhat uniform, so maybe I can shove the start back a few seconds or something. Anyway, let's kill a demon. Demons in general, though not particularly common in this game, are fairly vulnerable to magic damage. The skeletons in this area will also help you out, but sometimes he does like a flip in midair and kills you in one hit, so it's whatever. It's fine. Don't worry about it. He's not going anywhere. There are a fairly large number of reasons why I've had a lot of trouble finding the motivation to continue this thread. Hopefully, if I can get over the hump and actually record some new footage without the interference of Windows 10 dicking everything up, then I'll be able to get back on a more reasonable schedule without feeling despair at my entire life. sometimes it's just better to run past things. We have places to be. Honor is probably getting a little concerned about how often we're coming and going. Still, nothing new to report. Now, I have actually fallen off here by accident by going a little too fast, so I figure it's worth it to take an extra couple of seconds just to make sure I don't go sailing off the edge. Alright, let's try this again and try not to get killed in one hit. As I mentioned before I was rudely interrupted by questionable game mechanics, there are skeletons in this area that are not at all okay with the big fire demon being up in their grill. So, my plan here was, since I was having a little bit of trouble traditionally, was to aggro some skeletons down there and pull them into the big guy up here. It works okay. They sort of just crumple before the big guy. But it's a good way to kill multiple birds with one stone. Any damage the skeletons do to the demon is damage you don't have to do, and any skeletons the demon kills are skeletons that you don't have to deal with. Another very viable strategy is to simply get him up on the stairs where he sort of forgets how to do anything. I have a similar problem on stairs, so I don't really blame him. This skeleton is exceedingly nimble, and he has my respect. There are actually a bunch of different strategies that you can employ to beat the fire demon, which I enjoy a lot. I think that's actually one of the cooler encounters of the game. It would be better without a lot of the geometric fuckery that happened, but it's honestly way too much to expect from software to create a game that can function properly. Maybe magic against skeletons just isn't a good idea in general. Maybe I'll learn my lesson. It's hard to say. This is the aforementioned alternate strategy to dealing with the fire demon. This chest is a mimic. If you go ahead and aggro the mimic and run him into the demon, they'll get into a big old fight and one of them will probably die. Surprisingly, it's often the demon, because mimics don't fuck around. I've experimented with this method before, though I find it to be a little bit unreliable and a little dangerous. At any rate, once the mimic dies either way, you get the Black Blade, which is a katana that's fairly unremarkable, but katanas are cool, I guess. If you're into that dexterity sort of thing. Now, the demon does drop a special soul, so that's sort of reason enough to come down here. But we're not done just yet. There's still skeletons to plow through who weren't interested in joining the brawl. I should probably be using my Executioner's Greatsword here, but I think I forgot to re-equip it after fighting the demon, because it's not very effective against him. Boulder Heave does a much better job against the skeletons than the magic missile does. Takes them out in one shot and has a much wider range of effect. Since the skeletons pretty much charge towards you exclusively, it will almost always hit them if you can get the cast off. If they're too close, they might interrupt you. But it's a goofy enough and effective enough spell that I like to use it here. are a lot of skeletons down here, by the way. If you finagle enough of them up onto the ledge where the demon is, he can actually die very quickly just from sheer weight of numbers. But pulling in aggro and all that sort of thing has always been a little finicky in this game, so... The Ashen one does not have access to a taunt. A couple of useful pyromancy accessories over there that will boost our damage and resistances. And a bonfire. I think that it would probably be prudent to go back at this point. Carrying a fairly valuable bounty of souls and just not looking too great all around. Also want to mess with my spells a little bit. Burn an undead bone shard. Make sure I don't forget that.
Gracious.
We also have some ash to turn in. And since we're a little bit rich at the moment, I want to buy a couple of unique armor pieces. The Undead Legion set, in particular, is worthy of note, I guess.
Ashen one.
It's what the Abyss Watchers were wearing in their fight, as well as what Hawkwood was wearing sans the helm. He uses a regular chain coif.
Ah, there you are, unkindled one. Well. I've never seen anything like this. This inscription. This tome is from the Catacombs. Fascinating. On this day, the teacher learns alongside the pupil.
The Karthus tome actually has a couple of pretty darn useful spells in it. Karthus Beacon is very interesting, but the real prize, I think, is Karthus Flameark, which just sets your weapon on fire. A lot of things in this game are weak to fire, and this scales pretty well with your intelligence and faith, so it's a pretty big boost. The beacon basically rewards you for relentless aggression, sort of like you're playing Bloodborne. It's a bit more difficult to pull off in this game due to various mechanical limitations. And it's also kind of expensive in terms of stat investment, just for a character that would actually get a lot out of it. Now I'm going to go ahead and use the Soul of a Demon here because there's nothing that it offers that I can actually use, and it's worth quite a few souls.
Welcome home, I shall speak. Very well, then take nourish.
Neither of the weapons offered are also very good. They're kind of cool, but they're not good. Ain't it always the way?
Ashen one, may the
Ashen one.
So let's try on our new duds. The Undead Legion armor. It's got a nice flowing cape and it looks pretty cool. It's one of the nicer looking armors in the game. It's also reasonably light, so even casters can wear it for decent protection without too much hit to mobility. fans of Berserk will note that this makes you look a lot like the main character Guts, but I haven't read that, so I'm just sort of going off of hearsay. But it's mentioned enough that I feel like I would be remiss in my duties not to. Some clerical nonsense out of the way, we can get back to adventuring. The fire demon actually guards the way to an entirely new area that's completely optional. You don't actually have to come here to complete the game. Which is a good thing because the Smoldering Lake sucks. This entire area seems expressly designed to piss me off. Looks nice, though. The first thing that the wary traveler will probably notice is that there's a giant ballista shooting ballista bolts at you. You can use the giant tree stumps for cover, or you can simply roll around like an idiot. Using the tree stumps for cover is probably the more reliable method, but it's also quite slow. And it's not 100% reliable anyway. Now, you might think that this place can't actually get any worse now, because not only is there a giant ballista, but now there's a giant worm beast over there. But it actually does get a little worse. You might be thinking also, there's probably a way to deal with that ballista. Shouldn't you wait to gather up all the items before you do that? But there's actually a reason why I'm doing this with great harm to my person on the line, because of this wall. There's actually a fairly valuable ring behind that wall that you cannot get unless you use the ballista to break it. The speckled stone plate ring will increase all of your elemental resistances by a fairly sizable chunk. It's a versatile all-purpose ring that you can't really go wrong by wearing if you're expecting any kind of magical damage coming your way. Unfortunately, it's not very effective against giant ballista bolts. This patch of stone over here is also noteworthy. It's another thing that you can break open with the ballista bolts. This serves as an entrance of sorts to the rest of the area, but there's multiple ways to go in, and this is not one that I favor. We will be dealing with that another time. Also, there are a bunch of crabs wandering around in the background. This place is basically, actually, 100% literally the worst. Time to deal with big sandworm. Pick up one of the few references to Dark Souls 2 there are in this stupid game. The Shield of Want is a powerful medium shield that has the alternate effect of increasing the amount of souls that you get upon enemy death. If you have the stats to wield it, it's actually probably one of the best medium shields in the game, because it also has good resistances. And, you know, just getting more souls is one of the better ways to do things in the video game, I think. That's one of the things that I tend to do in games like this. I try to maximize the profits that... excuse me. I try to maximize the profits that I get, either in terms of gold, or experience, or whatever. Skills that increase those, I feel, are more valuable than skills that do other things. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. I remember it working quite well in Rogue Legacy. But then again, maybe I'm just bad at that game. It's been a while. So next on the agenda is to take care of this large, unpleasant fellow. And the way to do it most effectively is to simply pit the two hazards of the area against each other. Line yourself up about here. And wait. If you're feeling impatient, you can throw a fire orb that will probably miss. You can technically kill the worm with melee attacks, but he has a really weird hitbox and it sucks, so I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, in one way, it's kind of a cool environmental puzzle. In another way, it's kind of boring as shit. I'm just kind of throwing fire orbs because I have nothing else to do. Also, the worm shoots lightning for some reason. Making a frontal attack somewhat ill-advised. For our efforts here, or lack thereof, we get the Lightning Stake Miracle and the Undead Bone Shard. Both valuable pickups. Lightning Stake in particular is an interesting miracle that does a lot of damage at the cost of being fairly risky to use. Sort of like a lightning-based version of combustion. Of course, like all offensive miracles, it takes way too much faith to use to actually be worth it, so whether or not you want to bother is completely up to you. Still, there's more to do here. And one of the things we need to do is quite esoteric. Probably the most random, weird, obscure thing in the game. We will presumably get to it once I figure out what spells I'm going to be taking into the boss fight. Because you might have noticed there is a fog door over there. It is a fight that I have historically had some trouble with. Not necessarily in the blind run, but in subsequent runs I've had some real difficulty with the upcoming fight. So I'm just trying to make sure that I am as best equipped as I can be. Despite the fact that it's such a short run, it's still a somewhat dangerous boss run because the ballista will be shooting at you. And one of the things that I have to do is take a moment to summon this NPC. Great Swamp Cuculus. After the small eternity it takes for her to actually summon in, we can enter the fight. Sweat is not necessary for this battle, but I find it to be helpful. Because we're up against another demon. This one is the old Demon King. And he likes to use fire attacks. A lot of them are obnoxious and difficult to dodge. He will also just swing his giant bone hammer around. This fight is actually very difficult up close, which is why it's one of the few fights in the game where a ranged character will actually have a much better time of it. Sorcerers in particular can just shoot soul arrows at him for a fairly appreciable amount of damage from pretty safe distance. Dedicated pyromancers will probably have to get in close. As one might expect, fireballs and the like don't do a whole lot. Cuculus doesn't do a whole lot in this fight. She can be a useful distraction, but her primary form of offense is poisoning the guy, which is why literally all of our damage since the start of the fight is being displayed on the bar. Meteor Rain attack is probably one of his least dangerous moves, actually, simply because moving around dodges it very efficiently. The big sweeps and stuff from his hammer, and especially the combustion-like spell he uses, come out quickly and have kind of weird hitboxes. Now, I avoided that trap, but when he starts getting low on health, he will sort of feign death almost. But if you're getting close to try and finish him, he'll attack with a really, really powerful fire burst attack that's impossible to avoid. So if you don't know what's coming, and you're not at like full health if you go in to finish him when he does that, he will probably kill you, and it's kind of a mean trick. And kind of a mean trick in the way that you can't reasonably be expected to dodge it. Like, plenty of enemies just go into vulnerable states after you've done a bunch of damage. The old Demon King is a wily one, I guess. At any rate, since Cuculus survived the battle with us, and we summoned her in the first place, we have a reward to go collect in the Undead Settlement. The original Dark Souls like to do this sort of thing a lot, but to be perfectly honest, there are almost no other instances of this kind of mechanic being in Dark Souls 3, so it's very random, and you will probably miss it unless you habitually summon all unique NPCs, or you just really needed help with that fight and couldn't find anybody. If we go to the spot where we originally rescued Cornix, then we will find some rewards waiting for us. The Spotted Whip and his clothes. Now, Cornix is still alive and well back in Firelink Shrine, so why an alternate timeline version of his tattered robes is here, I do not know. Still, it's actually a very effective set for pyromancers and casters. It offers some good physical and status resistance. It also pairs up with the Old Sage's Blindfold, which we found in the Catacombs proper. Still though, Crown of Dusk is really pretty much best casting hat NA, so it's difficult to justify taking that off. And this is actually an item that I missed way back when. There we go. I was having some clipping errors with that little piece of plywood that was jutting up. I briefly forget where it actually drops here, so I went back to the bonfire. There it is. Okay, I had to go all the way back around. Anyway, that's the Partisan. It's a spear. Spears are cool. Not really using them on this character, but they're cool. Partisan has some things to recommend about it, but it's sort of whatever. I'm extremely enthusiastic for this part of the game, if you can tell. Now, despite the recording issues, I actually did pretty darn well gameplay-wise, despite the various technical difficulties. And that I am fairly thankful for. Now, the old Demon King soul does have some things we can make out of it, so it's time to pay our old pal a visit.
Happened upon any twisted souls?
Turning in his soul will earn us Chaos Bed Vestiges, which, under another name, might be known as Forbidden Sun.
Do not be away.
This pyromancy appeared in Dark Souls 2 and was very effective. You basically just threw a giant fireball that moved pretty fast and did a lot of damage. It's not especially exciting, but it's very strong. It's also unique in fireballs in that it actually goes in a straight line for the most part. You don't really have to deal with an arc. I figure since that the Demon King is actually an optional boss and we went all the way out of our way to go show it off, while I'm at it, I'll show off Forbidden Sun too. Sorry, Chaos Bed Vestiges. When the game lets me, anyway. Any day now. There we go. I knew you could do it, game. It was sort of a whiff, but either way the damage was considerable. There's also one last thing to show off here. Once you beat the Abyss Washers, Hawkwood leaves the shrine and he leaves his shield behind. Which makes sense because his shield is kind of a piece of crap, but you can parry with it if you want. There's 10 better parrying shields, but it's there. I'm trying to find a spot to actually better test the effective range of this. I'm gonna try and snipe that guy. Fortunately, we don't quite have the distance on it. And what a terrible tragedy that is. Next time we go to hell. I hope you're ready, because I'm not.